In the tapestry of life, where every thread holds a story, America in Black and White emerges as a haven for the voices echoing through the heart of our communities. In this podcast, we wade through the rivers of our collective experiences, celebrating the vibrant hues of change brought forth by the whispers of hope and the roars of action. It's more than just a conversation. It's a journey into the heart of our society, illuminated by the light of those daring to dream and do. Join us, and let your voice be the melody that guides us toward a dawn where every color finds its place in the masterpiece of our shared destiny. Together, let's paint a future brimming with the positives that dwell in our minds and the actions that shape our world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of America in Black and White. I'm your host, Charles King. Tonight on America in Black and White, we honor a man whose life's work stands at the intersection of education, leadership, and generational transformation. In a world where our young people are too often underestimated, he has spent nearly 4 decades proving what is possible when you build systems that believe in them, invest in them, and prepare them for the world they deserve. From Patterson to Springfield, from Hartford to Boston, from the classroom to the superintendent's office, Kevin McCaskill has lived a journey that reflects discipline, resilience, and a relentless commitment to excellence. He is a builder of schools, of programs, of pathways, of people, and his impact stretches far beyond test scores or graduation rates. His work has shaped futures, strengthened communities, and redefined what career and technical education can be for Black and Brown students across this country. Tonight, we explore the story behind the leader, the educator, the coach, the mentor, the visionary, and the man who continues to push the boundaries of what public education can achieve. This is America in Black and White, and this is the conversation we've been waiting to have. Let's bring Kevin McCaskill to the stage, please. Hello, sir.
How are you this evening, sir?
I am just excellent. What about yourself?
Doing well up here in New England.
Well, I definitely want to thank you for being with us, and I'm glad that you could take the time to be with us and help us to continuously build our communities when it comes to education. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we get going?
Well, first and foremost, I am greatly appreciative of this opportunity. And I thank you for having me on the program this evening and look forward to our conversation this evening.
Yes, sir. So I want to get started here where I like to, where we could get the opportunity to learn who Kevin was before Kevin became who he is today. Can you tell us, growing up in Patterson, New Jersey, what experiences shaped your early understanding of education and opportunity?
Well, I definitely say my mother and my grandmother, because they made it a point that school was important. And growing up with a single mom who worked double shifts as a nurse and a grandmother that worked as a domestic, work ethic was in our family bone, our DNA. And they made to it that I wasn't going to be the one hanging out in the corners and using a term that my grandmother used. I wasn't going to be no hoodlum walking around the streets of Patterson. So they really put a strict emphasis on achievement, reading and writing, all those things associated with school. So I knew from an early age what was important.
So, how did attending Patterson Public Schools influence your identity and leadership style?
Well, Patterson was a different place. It was a school system in a state of flux. It seemed like every single year. And I went to school in the 60s and the 70s. And, we have 40 some odd students in the classroom of varying degrees. And it wasn't where a lot of lessons were differentiated. Either you got it or you didn't. And if you didn't, there was a course of action that was taken for you. And I see you smiling, say how you can understand where I'm coming from with that. But it was really a sink or swim situation. It was so unfortunate back then because a few friends of mine who didn't make it. And obviously they turned to other types of activity that didn't lead them lead them to positive outcomes. But that was growing up. It's a tough city, Patterson, and you grow up in surroundings that can be sometimes difficult. People of not great means, and so you learn a lot on the street. You learn a lot by the folks in your neighborhood. You learn where to go and where not to go, and who to talk to and who not to talk to. But you learn a lot of life lessons about navigating life and understanding those terms of adaptability and resiliency and all those terms that people use today. We were living that back then. So I'm so thankful for the way I was raised in Patterson and the lessons that it taught me to get me to this point today.
Can you tell us what are some of those lessons that you learned?
Being tough, not being afraid, and in essence, not getting, as you know, Charles, not getting punked out when you're trying to get something done, and really holding your own, and really holding your own. And I'm not just talking fists and everything else. I'm talking about with your mind and everything else. But it also taught you that grit, that work ethic, that grind, always staying on your grind to be successful. And those are the things that are characteristics of Patterson that I hold true today, where everybody who was worth something, they was always on that grind, working hard to keep it moving, no matter what the obstacles, how to over obstacles that may be from a power perspective, obstacles for not having other in your life for stretches of time, but someone having role models and seeking out role models, utilizing sports as an avenue and a vehicle to get out your certain circumstances. So it really taught me that just can go on and on. I know you got a lot more, but it was really those early life lessons about learning moving to here.
As you think about those life lessons though, and think about, let's transcend that, let's compare that to today's times. Do you feel like you in those life lessons had the ability and learned what it was to critically think compared to having to teach a lot of that to the kids today?
In life, it really, and that's a great question. And I think just when you have to learn how to maneuver and navigate, you're automatically critically thinking. You are problem solving. And in some instances, you're problem solving on the spot. And I'll give you a great example. Walking home from school, Charles, and you got to make a business decision about going to a certain neighborhood where there's some tension. And so, you learn observations, situational, which is great. And you're sitting there seeking, well, if I go this way, I can avoid all this. Then you know what? I know I can outrun a whole bunch of folks if I get a good running start. And so you start digging. So you start getting those thoughts in your mind, but you're actually you're calculating, thinking, problem solving all at once, all within seconds. And that's just a small example, but those are some of the things that growing up in Patterson taught me.
So, what role did your family play in your development as a student and leader?
And I didn't hear that last question, Charles, breaking up a little bit.
Okay, what role did your family play in your development as a student and leader?
Oh, support. I mean, they always believed in my abilities to be successful in school, but they demanded that, and it was really go to school, as my grandmother say, be mannerable, behave yourself, make sure that, the McCaskill name is ours and it's on your back. And so make sure that people know that you've been raised right. And so those are some of the things that you learn very quickly about that, but it was a level of expectations, high expectations, not a lot of excuses. My mother and my grandmother did not, they didn't accept excuses of why I couldn't be successful. And it resonates with me today, where minimizing all the obstacles doesn't matter. It's about getting things done and getting them done the right way. And so important role my entire life, as well as my uncle, who was a pivotal person in my life as well. He was that male role model who really came out and got me to the point really interested to grow my love of mathematics and statistics and this stuff, because he's a computer scientist, one of the first Black computer scientists that I had ever met. But he was really intriguing to talk to, and really, again, emphasize excellence in the classroom, emphasize excellence on behaving yourself in a certain manner to really have folks would listen to. He was really active in athletics, which is something that he really pushed me with as well.
So, when did you first realize you wanted to become an educator?
I think by mistake. I was working. I was working at Mass Mutual, fortunately, in Springfield. Right after graduation, and working in the group in the part, and I realized that corporate America really was like because I'd also had jobs in recreation, and I just quickly found out that those cubicles kind of box you in a little bit. And I said, that's not me. And so I stayed there about 3 years. But then Mass Mutual had this program with the Springfield Public Schools where they would want us to tutor. They said the employees would give you maybe 1 or 2 half days and pay you for it, and you can go and tutor in one of the local schools. I think I was the first person running in line just to get that afternoon off and get paid. But when I went to Classical High School, the old Classical High School in Springfield, to tutor those first cohorts of students, Charles, I just fell in love with the opportunity to help young people. And I said, you know what? I think I might want to teach. And I think I did that for a few months. And I think in May of 1988, I actually applied to be a teacher in Springfield Public Schools. I think a week later they hired me, and I started that August. And let me tell you, it's the best career move that I've ever made. I haven't looked back since.
Wow. Now that's fascinating, because I think sometimes when a lot of us get caught in corporate America, it kind of like washes the brain a little bit, and you find yourself, as you were saying, when those walls are closing in, and you got, all of these other different things that's happening, and it's like you're thinking totally different. And so when you get to that point of wanting to make that decision, then you kind of like make it like how you did. But a lot of people really don't think of what's that next thing. So when you did that to actually get into the public
That's right.
school system to teach, what was the that final nail that said, this is what I'm gonna do?
I think that first day when those students start coming into that classroom and you just see them, and Charles, they look like me. These kids look like me.
Right.
And when I felt that I had something to offer them, and they looked at me in a strange way, because I think I was the first Black teacher they had, someone they ever had. But it was amazing where all of a sudden I felt this sense of, you know what, all eyes are going to be on you every day, and how you comport yourself will determine the outcomes for these young people going forward, not just for your individual math class, but then being successful after that. And just to hear and to feel, and I think we just hit the ground running. And it was amazing the relationships that you build with your students, and it's second to none. I think you got to be, and people who work with young people, I think, can understand that. It's created very early things, being a former math teacher. Everybody hate math. So how many people hate math? Everybody hand in every class go up. And a goal of mine was saying, well, at the end of the year when we do this, guarantee you some hate math, but you won't hate it, but it's in it. And it's amazing how you can just transform a group of 150 to 175 students to see how math is so relevant in their lives and how it connects of their life going forward, and not just for a test or anything else, that you can utilize to benefit you and your family for years to come.
How did your transition from Patterson to Willingboro impact your worldview?
Well, it's a change of family dynamic. My mother got married, and Willingboro was a suburban environment, and it was the first home. It was a home. You're living in a home. You're not living in a three family tenement building, 3 family tenement house. So yeah, had a little yard out in front and all that, all the good things. The air seemed a little fresher. There were the trees all over the place. So yeah, it was a real transition. I couldn't sleep for the first 3 or 4 weeks because it was too quiet. But it was a transition into a real diverse, truly a diverse community, Willingboro, where I lived in Patterson. I mean, we're predominantly black. I mean, it's a and you had some families, but going to Willingboro, you saw for the first. I was seeing a lot of interracial families, which was again kind of new. But it was just great seeing just a different slice of life. And not only was I lived there, I went to Willingboro High for 2 years. But it was something that was different and unique, and it was something that really helped me. That there's a brave new world out there outside the world of Patterson, and it was a great experience because it really helped me going on into college.
Also, so with that change of environment, what did that environment change do for you mentally and physically?
But I was like, well, if you say physically, I actually started growing a little bit. I think I went from 5'4" to 5'10". I think I went from 5'4" to about 5'10", and so that someone's that air and that water down there in South Jersey. But it was being around different people, different types of people. It was and it was really fascinating to have that. And it was a school that was a lot more than the schools that I went to. Wow, these schools aren't falling apart. These and ceiling tiles are actually still in, and it was just a different feel and dynamic where tension you were able. I mean, it seemed like you were just free. And just feeling sure of always look, circumspectly every single day. People were allowed themselves, and it was just a fantastic community to grow up in. And once again, I only really lived down there for the 2 years, my junior and senior year. I think I was fortunate also that my aunt and uncle lived in the community prior, so I'd go down and visit them, and for a couple of weeks on end, but nothing to put in there. But Willingboro was a real special place as well.
What challenges did you face as a young black man pursuing higher education in mathematics?
Well, there weren't many others in the business when you talk mathematicians and black scientists on, and I just had I just numbers and so always trying to seek out who's doing that and not to find someone that really shared that. Again, I was fortunate that my uncle was really, again, very analytical, very calculating, being in computer science. But outside of that, there wasn't really anyone else. And so when you're talking to other people about what they're doing, and I know one of the things when I was heading on to college, and the first thing they ask, what you want to major, what are you going to major in? And, either English or PE or something like that. I said, no, mathematics. And and everybody would just short circuit. And I found it interesting. I found it funny, but most importantly, it was motivating as well. Make sure that I should get that degree in mathematics. Stigma that we're not entertainers. We're more than folks that can be athletically gifted. That we are analytical. We do think critically. We can problem solve all types of STEM fields. So that was a motivation, and this was something started school all the way through college and into my career as well.
Who were the mentors who helped guide you early in your early academic journey?
Once again, Charles, you broke a little bit.
Who were the mentors who helped guide your early academic journey?
One of the mentors, I would say, early to really make the transition to the public schools was Bishop Dr. Bryant Robinson, who was not only was he a local clergyman in Springfield, but he was also, at the time, deputy superintendent and interim superintendent in Springfield Public Schools. And he played just a vital role in, one, getting me into the field of education, but always keeping my mind about this is about presence, but it's also about making sure you are a role model for others to follow you. And he really took an interest in me even before I got into the field of education. And it was great to have someone push you to know a lush career in the city of, and to have him really mentor me through the years that I was in Springfield, and even without. I couldn't ask for a better. I couldn't ask for a better man. And God first and foremost, but he was a man who believed in education. He really believed in the power of education to transform lives, and that again resonated in my heart. That if he can do this for X number, nearly 4 decades as well, and at some point in time, mantle has to grab that mantle and move forward, and just make sure that we can also then I can continue his legacy of uplifting, especially Black male educators to heights that no one has ever seen.
What personal values carried you through college and into your career?
Well, college, it was a matter, I think it was more or less, this college is not going to defeat me from not graduating. And especially when, and I went to a predominantly white institution in which the history that a lot of Black students didn't fare well, where again, they would either transfer out or just would not finish. And, what helped me a great deal was that motivating factor where I'm not going to be one of those individuals, for, again, I played basketball as well, which helped greatly. A mathematics major, sitting there with with all white folks around me, and I said, "No, this is going to happen. That's going to be my motivation. I'm not going to be the one that walks away from this." So it was always that from my freshman year to my senior year. That was always a driving force that I'm going to make it, and I'm just as good. I'm just as good as all my classmates, if not better. And that's something that I had to not only prove to prove that to myself, but I think by just sticking it out and getting it done, it really opened the eyes of quite a few folks.
So, how did your athletic background shape your discipline and leadership?
Well, if you want to be anywhere, if you want to be decent in anything, you got to work hard. And again, I go back to earlier on in our conversation about work ethic, and that's something I knew of very early in life. And so with sports, again, discipline, character, resilience, hard, you got to suffer a little pain in order to be good. And I've been fortunate to have some really good coaches that really put that as an emphasis, and being tapped as a captain, in both in high school and as well as college, where people are looking for you for strength. They're looking for you for guidance, but most importantly, for you to always be in control in the worst of times. And I think that's just those opportunities of leadership early on, that coaches had enough faith in my ability and the character that I possessed to name me captain. I think really, and it helped build the demand that day.
So, during your sports days, can you tell us what was the importance of teamwork and developing a team? Because I think when you have a great team around you, it makes everyone better. How did that work for you?
Well, I tell you, it's something where, and if I can go with athletics do a lot about teamwork. And as corny and cliche-ish as it sounds, important. How do you get to be on the same page? And despite the best laid plans may suddenly go awry, how do you, as a leader, get it back on the rails? And that was something, again, in athletics taught me that. And it's really paid dividends up until today. When you have large, complex schools such as Brockton High School, we have over 3,500 students. It's a complex system. Lessons in life about forming relationships and teamwork and understanding. And where one thing I would never ask anyone to do something that I wasn't willing to do or willing to sacrifice. And when folks see that, more because they know you're not going to lead them down a road of perdition. And that's how I pretty much start to develop leadership. And I'm still growing in leadership, 30 plus years of being in it, I'm still growing. But going back to those formative years of athletics and being a leader and understand, going back to my years of teaching when I was a team leader of our little cohort of 8th grade teachers, it really started building those building blocks, solidifying those building blocks for where I am today as leader of Brockton.
So, what lessons from coaching basketball translated directly into school leadership?
Boy, sometimes the best laid plans they go awry, and it teaches you how to adapt, transition, and really stay committed to a system that you feel that can work. But it also teaches you, again, how do you put the right people in the right places at the right times to move the needle for success. And that's what coaching, because coaching, as you know, it's second by second. Things change in a heartbeat, and you have to pivot at certain times, and sometimes that pivot comes within seconds. And so really understanding how fast your mind can work to adapt to a certain situation has really helped me tremendously with the thinking process when something comes up in school, where you're automatically going into options and abilities to pivot, and how should we pivot? What's going to be that next move, and not just the next move, what would be the next? If I make this move, what are some of the consequences that can occur? And all these processes are happening within seconds. And I think coaching, that's what it's all about. Thinking that great, grander, obviously, such, but has real leadership.
Let's transition over to you. Let's delve a little bit deeper into you becoming an educator. What drew you to middle school mathematics as your entry point into education?
Going in and making that transition from corporate and private industry into the public schools. First I had to convince my wife that why we had to take that pay cut first and foremost to do this. So that was an interesting conversation to begin with. But when you're going
I bet.
So, but going in and understanding that I felt good about it, but understanding the impact, not the effect, but the impact that you can have on young people. That's what I wanted to really experience. And that I thought and I still do, I have something to offer them, and offer them with someone that looks just like them, who's grew up in the same neighborhoods that they grew up in. And here it is. And I used to come to, and I'm going back to the 80s with a shirt and tie every day. That's something I didn't see every day. And so you start changing the narrative of what it looked like to be a teacher, and a black teacher, and a black role model. And I take that role model role extremely serious, even up until this conversation now. And it's something in which I really want to put myself in the best light so they can see the light. I always want that to happen with our young people. And so coming in, I knew that, math was going to be it, but I knew that there were bigger lessons to learn about responsibility, really taking your proper stance in society, being bold, but not being belligerent. Having, in essence, where you always walk with your head up and your shoulders back, that you were confident in who you were and in the skin that you were in. So it was just much more bigger than mathematics. And I think in the 6 years, I only taught for 6 years, but that was the goal. And I think our mission was accomplished.
So in the beginning, and as we think about just growing up, and you're doing middle school, and these kids are going through the growing pains because they're growing and minds are all over the place. How were you able to navigate that in order to start that process to transcend and grow like it has?
I'd say, it's something when you look at young people through the lens of what first and foremost, understanding that they are not adults. Understand that their frontal lobes are that they're going to say things flip at times, but knowing that there's a higher plane that you can to see that light come. Trust me, when you see that light come on with young people, it is as exciting as you can ever imagine, and not just see it in one, but to see it in a class where when they start to get it, and then they began to really understand. I'm actually smart, and I can do things, and I can actually articulate things, and I can show people. No, I mean that's the point that when in education you can't put a price tag on that feeling, and that's where I think the thrill of teaching is when you get those aha and those light bulb moments where it just resonates within large groups of students and they get it. And that's why you see, people who've taught for over 30, nearly 40 years. They love that buzz that you get. And it's not just a pat on the back. It's the satisfaction of lifting up young people.
So what did those first 6 years in the classroom teach you about students, learning, and yourself?
Repeat that one more time, Charles.
Okay. What did those first 6 years in the classroom teach you about the students, learning, and yourself?
What it taught me a lot about resiliency when some lesson plans didn't work.
I can imagine.
But
I can imagine.
But I think with the learn for me with the students is the proof was in the pudding again with our state testing, because we the students that I received, I was fortunate that our students were always testing above grade level, which was fabulous. But the learning piece is that it just wasn't from out of a book. It was something that you can really connecting mathematics to every sector of their life. Really interesting, so they could actually see the beauty part of the why this is important, as opposed to just getting a grade or just knowing how to disconnect. Something as simple as teaching students how to discount sales, utilize sales discounts in their head, the mental math pieces. They were amazed that they could actually do it. And I said, think about it. You could probably get the number faster than they can ring it up on the register. Things where start to thinking in that critical mind going. And it was just fascinating to me that they could start getting an appreciation of a subject matter that not only was a mandate, but this mandate transcended the classroom. And as a learner, I learned from them. I learned how to read when to hold, when to pull or push the the accelerator, but then when to rein myself back in to saying we're going a little bit too fast. We're going a little bit too fast. Let's slow the pace down and let's see how much, because they're not getting it. They're not getting it. It really taught me how to read a room quickly. And I know, I got better as I went along.
Wow. I gotta say, the thing that I am always proud of and really makes me happy is that when I have the you know, you like and other black men that are educators that have been here on the show, it's like you guys are really making a difference in these classrooms. But it's just so it's crazy that, you know, people don't have the opportunity to know just the impact that you're having in that classroom,
Right.
and how you're actually changing the whole game of education, you know?
Oh, yes, indeed. You said a mouthful right there, Charles. You said a
Yeah.
mouthful.
Yeah. So how did your approach building relationships with students in Springfield? How did you approach? I'm sorry. How did you approach building relationships with students in Springfield?
You know, I think one of the advantages that I had, and I might have said it previously, I used to work for the Park and Rec department part time at night. So we had open gym, and so you're dealing with young people in a different manner. And so I really just building those types of relationships, and I was coaching at the time, and a few of the kids would know. So that there was a common interest, and really learning how to gauge students, see what motivated them, see what motivated them. Why are you? It's 0 degrees out here, and you coming into the gym with no coat on. What's going on? You must want to really love basketball, or something else is going on. But it's really started to have these conversations with young people and see how they tick. And that was the part about, if they were from different households, they were from different socioeconomic situations. They had certain dislikes, and really getting to know them. And then pieces when we talk music. McCaskill likes rap music too. Now, McCaskill don't go overboard with that stuff that go overboard, but I like that too. So when you look at common,
Yes.
food is another. So I eat too. So you really get to know what the student is all about, and so those are things that just building relationships, and always being a listener, which is crucial. Always,
Right.
always being a listener.
So, what were the biggest challenges facing urban schools when you began teaching?
I think so. One of the things is just one, attendance coming on a regular basis. Just with the initiative that we're talking about, but also I think student apathy about, well, this stuff isn't important. And one of the pieces that I really incorporated during teaching history, especially when it comes understanding that they're in those seats because someone died to get in those seats. People sacrifice their bodies and their lives to be sitting in those seats. And that's something, Charles, that we've forgotten today. And I think that has to be revisited in our urban. And I think once our students realize that someone sacrificed for me to have this seat, I owe it to them. I owe it because that could have been my uncle, my great grandfather, my grandfather doing these things. So really putting it into the context of history of Black folks, saying, look, you really need to understand why you were sitting in that seat, getting a free education of others that don't look like you. And and I really had our 8th graders really to understand that. And that really transcended every stop I've gone, because I can't forget, the Rock Nine. I can't forget those things. I forget those building schools for Black folks. So these things in which keep them historical. It appeared, I think the students, they were getting it and understanding they have a moral responsibility to their ancestors, responsibility to their ancestors, their heritage going forward. lot for them to seats.
Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me now? Hello? Kevin, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I think my connection a little bit. Yep, you're coming back in. Yep.
Okay. Um, how did you navigate the transition from teacher to assistant principal?
Different world. Different world. And you're no longer the classroom teacher. Now it's in your little sector of your room. Now it's more global. Now it's more global. And one of the, going back in the early 90s when I started as an assistant principal, it was all about discipline, 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 and more discipline. And I was fortunate again to have mentors such as Dr. Robinson and a few others, that it's not just about discipline, it's about understanding, similar in the classroom, students understanding their responsibilities. And that responsibilities are being the best version of yourselves at all times, understanding your responsibilities as a student, and understand that you are representing your families as well going forward. And so it's really, once again, carrying myself as a role model, suit and tie every single day, suit and tie every day, just like I am now. And really speaking and not talking at students, but really talking to students, talking to parents. But the biggest issue was, boy, and we had some rough teachers, because if something happened, they pretty much want the student to go in the guillotine and come back, as opposed to saying, they got to come back to class at some point in time. But it was really a great transition because I had, great people around me. And I think when you have great people around you that really believe in your abilities, that transition was as seamless as I can possibly get it. And I really enjoyed that time. And I was at two different schools. I was at when I moved to my first assistant principal's position, I went to another school. But then I was fortunate to come back to my school in which I taught. That was a different dynamic, because now you leave as a teacher, but you're coming back as somebody's boss.
Right, right.
A dynamic, trying to, working through that dynamic. But I think understanding, when everyone understands and when you communicate, I'm not here to be your boss. I'm here to be a support for you. And that's just having a great mentor. My great mentor principal, Carol Fazio, who was just unbelievable as a mentor. She was just the master of that. And I think having great mentors in your life helps a lot with that transition. And once again, I consider myself extremely fortunate to have those folks in my life.
So, what leadership lessons did you learn during your 8 years as an AP?
Accountability. One was accountability to all constituents. That's to, obviously, to the staff, that's to students, as well as parents in the community, making sure that we are responsible for the outcomes of these young people. And so there are certain things, when from a discipline perspective, when we had to adhere to certain policies and administer discipline to students, that it was fair and just. But most importantly, we had to go into those classrooms to make sure that lessons were tight, making sure students are learning, and offer supports to teachers in order to maximize student outcomes. Those were just as important. It was just as important really reaching out to parents, and not just to call to indicate that we needed them to come in for a hearing for a suspension, but hey, your son is turning it around. Making sure that we have those total lines of communication, both for the good, the and the not so good. So really creating those trusting relationships. And I want to put an emphasis on those trusting relationships, because they went across the board with students, because students might have not liked what you have did, like for the consequence they were given, but parents the same way. Why they understood why. That reason for the staff that we were always looking out for students' best interests. And those are some of the leadership pieces that we as business, not just for outcomes on test scores, we want to create dynamic learning environments in which everyone grows, everyone prospers, and each teach one. And we're here as a support network for each and every person in our community.
Wow. You know, I really like that. And I think that teaches stability, and that also teaches what it is to make sure that you're not able to do it unless you know what you're doing. Is that something that
Absolutely.
you brought along with you from your early childhood as what your grandparents and your mother and father was teaching you? Because this is like when you say they told you, you're representing them with that name, so they're representing you with this knowledge.
I tell you, it's something that I go back to my grandmother and my mother. I mean, strong women. It's something when you're trying to raise a knucklehead young man who sometimes doesn't listen all the time, but they made it a point that they never gave up on me. They never gave up on me. But again, there's the lessons of character, being responsible, being mindful of always being mindful of other people. That was a big thing, being mindful of other people as well. And those are ingrained in me. They were ingrained in me from an early age. And I'm ever so thankful for both of them.
So, what made you effective in supporting teachers and improving instructions?
Being able to look at things and say, did you try this? Is this a possibility? Always being strategizing and sitting down, and I always say, and also listening as well. Really offering solution as opposed to, well, that's not getting done, that's not getting done, you do this. Stretch educators to say, well, how about comfort zone a little bit and try something here that's more cooperative, a learning strategy, and maybe really loosen up the reins on the instruction, where have students do some of this in the cooperative group, in the small learning groups, in groups of 4, groups of 3, whatever it may be. And I think really when they start seeing that students, especially middle school students, they got to move them sitting for the time, something gonna happen. Something gonna happen. But constructively activities that really allow a lot of kinetics, a lot of movement. I think really having them understand how to classes. If 50% of your students aren't passing in this assessment, about what they have learned. So how do you segments? What particular really learn how to disaggregate pieces? What pieces within that math lesson are they not getting? What concepts? And if they're not getting, how can you think about how you teach that particular piece? And so really scrutinize their own strategies as opposed to just saying that's wrong, you need to do this, but really get them to the realization, how do I really self-observe my own work, and how do I readjust my work in order for students to gain mastery over it? And so it's really working with the educators and supporting the educators as opposed to just being the supervisor and telling them what to do.
So, how did you balance discipline, culture, and academic expectations?
I think you align them. I think they have to be aligned. And one, if you're not, if you're disruptive, you're not learning. Coming in, and I still do it to today. If students are coming in on a discipline for a disciplinary matter, I look at their grades. So here you're acting this way, but yet I'm looking at grades that are this. What's going on? I said, because at some point in time, and again, I like to send it from school to real world. I said, do you think if you're working in a job or a career, and I don't like using the word job, I like using the word career, in a career that's willing to pay you six figures, and you're acting in a certain way and you have these expectations, how long do you think you're going to be employed? And they'll say, not at all. I said, well, the same. See, you're learning that lesson now. So you will be prepared to make those six figures and continuously make six figures until you stop working. So if we learn these habits, stop disrupting class because it's not now affecting you. Imagine your student, your peers in the, they're not being productive either. So in essence, it's a selfish act. And students begin to internalize that wow, my behavior is not just me, but how the effect that it has on everyone in that classroom, including the teacher. We get to really align those, that everything that you're doing, if you're being disrespectful, how that transcends that, that's not an employable skill. That doesn't keep you gainfully employed for a long period of time. You know, just don't do the work. Once again, being employed. Because one, that means you're not growing and you're not producing. Especially high school students really get it. But they really get to grasp their responsibilities. And so even though, let's say we have a situation where we have to remove students, well, you know, we've got to, you know, you're going to be suspended. But when you come back, we're going to welcome you with open, because it's fresh start. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And this is the time for you to make mistakes. But by hoping that you'll learn that you can't fight people in your career. You can't fight people in the office. You can't tell your boss where they can go. Can't do those things.
Right.
Learn these right in high school. High school, we're going to learn that right here. So once that you're able to feed your family and family for many, many a decade, and when you can meld, you know, discipline as well, look forward what their behaviors now, habits that they create, can either be an attribute for them going forward or it can be a detriment to them going forward.
So, what do you believe makes a great school leader?
Oof. If you ask 100 school leaders that question, you might get, you know, some commonality. But I think someone who is very visible, very approachable, enthusiastic and passionate about the position itself, who is always willing to, in a position to support, is an exhorter, is always upbeat, even despite the times where it's not for, you know, a facade, but you're always looking for a way better, always looking for a way better, but always understanding the power of education and preaching the power of education. And it's something that it's like your aura and everyone sees it. And I think leaders who are really great listeners, because one of the things I've come to, you know, in my 38 years of doing this, I do not have all the answers, and I do have blind spots. And when those blind spots are exposed, I have to swallow a lot of surprise. And you say, yeah, you know what? You are correct. Understanding that you can be wrong, and living with that. And that doesn't diminish you as the leader. It makes you someone who's growing. And that's one thing I've always wanted to say. I always want to be in a position at age 64 and 38 years in here. I'm still growing. I have not made it yet. And I think when you have that mindset and you always have this can-do attitude, I mean, people just get excited about the possibilities of moving forward. And once again, I've been fortunate to be in positions in which that's always been the case. And then even in my current position here, where they're seeing the possibilities of just becoming this dynamic learning environment here in Brockton, and people are just jumping on board. But really, and also being very knowledgeable about quite a few things, not just with leadership, but again, across the board, just understanding trends in education, really literally all over. If they're doing something exciting, get about, find great partners within the community, partners within the private sector, because once again, these are the individuals who will, at some point in time, may hire your students. So really, really have a total engagement and commitment to your school community.
So, what moments from your early career still guide your decisions today?
And it sounds, and I always use this when I hear that term, all students can learn. I say, I go beyond that. All students have possibilities of greatness and success. Some of it's delayed, but there's something within every single student. And I hold firm to that. I hold firm to it, that there is something within every student, and we've got to find it and we got to tap into it. And so many times with Black and brown students, we're not investing enough to tap into it, to find that connective tissue for them. And that's something that's been a trek for me for 38 years, that I will continue to look at tapping into. What can we do to turn on that light and turn on that generator within them to get them excited about something? If it's a subject, if it's a club, if it's something that really puts a light in their life. And that's a journey. And sometimes it takes some excavation to get to it with some of our students. But I think it's worth the dig. I think it's worth the dig.
So, let's talk about your leadership across multiple schools. What was your vision when you became principal of DeBerry Elementary?
Well, I was replacing a legend, a woman by the name of Barbara Jefferson, who had been there for 30 plus years, and she was a pillar to the community. And I think the key part of transitioning from her to me was me and her we were colleagues, and she really helped me greatly transition to that role. And for me, it was new. I was coming from middle school to elementary school. But when it was a K through 5 school, and in the heart of the neighborhood, and it's something where once again, it's all about presence and suit and tie every single day, and making sure that I was that role model that these young people saw every single day. And one thing I told the staff is that, in middle school, we don't teach students how to read in middle school. So you're going to show me and Charles, I got a lesson in the 2 years I was there. It was remarkable to see how students learn how to read. And that really set the impetus for me understanding the value of education, patience in education, strategies, differentiated learning. That laid the framework of all those pieces for me to move forward. And I see that I needed that 2 years. I needed that 2 years in elementary school to get to to get to the high school level, become a better leader.
So, how did you approach leading in elementary school after years in secondary education?
Different, because once again, you're learning the true foundation of learning, and the importance of great teaching. And I was fortunate that we had great elementary school. That every day, one thing you learn about young kids, every day is a new day. They might have been spilling paint and knocking over stuff the one day, and they came to school as if nothing happened the next day. As I wish I could have that feeling every day with our high school kids. But it was a new day every day. And that really, they see the world through just a different lens. They don't harbor ill will. They don't harbor mistakes that were made. McCaskill, here for another day of school. And so it was a way of mentality that I think I wish all our students could have. Because, as you know, they get older. Man, I don't like this. It got on my nerves last week, and I'm still harboring those. Hey, come on now. Come on. We got to get over that. And so, but that was a key component that I've tried to keep here, where that was yesterday. Yesterday was yesterday. Today is today. what's going to be different about you? And I think that's the biggest thing I learned of bringing that spirit of the elementary school student and the elementary school environment, that mistakes in the past they don't determine who you are today, because you can change everything today moving forward. And that's something that I think I had to, once again, had to go to elementary school to get that lesson.
So, as you think about that, though, because that's really really interesting that you can actually see the phases of the kids from elementary to middle school to high school, and you get that growth, and as you say, how that mind changes.
That's right.
So, with you dealing with these elementary kids, and you getting a chance to see that, how happy, or shall I say, how proud of you were you to actually see the fruitfulness of what you guys were actually teaching these kids?
And that's a great synopsis, where I've been, and not many educators get that opportunity to see every school student. And believe it or not, I actually saw some of the elementary school students that I had when I went to high school. So just to see growth in them, that maturity to play. And when you're in product, you understand. I always say elementary school teachers, sometimes they get shortchanged because they don't see the result. They're the foundation, they're the most important pieces. Build those firm foundations of other big. Hey, we don't hit each other, we don't do those things, but learn manners and learning how to cooperate, but learning to be inclusive about what you're learning. That's what they do, but they don't see that end result, in which the high school world hit the ground running after high school, be it in higher education or the world of work or the military. They're mature enough to handle a gap year. And one of the beauty parts again about being in high school, students come back to high school. They may be 21, 22, 23, 24. They come back to the high school, and you see even more growth. And so the pieces, I think, that are just hidden gems of education. We're privy to it. Something I wish that more and more educators were privy to, or people learning it, that appreciation of the growth of students.
What were your biggest accomplishments at DeBerry?
That one up for me, please.
What were your biggest accomplishments at DeBerry?
Oh, 2 years, I think, really good. 2 years there, just really from an academic perspective. I think when we did the assessment piece, we were in the low 30s. You're over like close to 30 some odd elementary schools. I want to say we were probably ranked about 28th with respect to test scores. In America, we went to 12 over the achievement. But I think really vamping the library, we had this huge literacy initiative, and we had a called Reader to Reader, and they were really, really benefits in getting us free books for our not only school were able to get books to start their own libraries at home. Piece for us was a literacy piece, but really having a partner such as Springfield College, which was tremendous for us, between the mentoring program and getting our students off our site onto that campus as elementary school students walking around the college campus. I mean, it was tremendous with some of the partnerships that we created, and that was a real short period of time. And I wish I had a little bit more time at DeBerry. I think we would have accomplished quite a bit more. But superintendent at the time said I was having too much fun, and he moved me to the high school.
What led to your reassignment to Putnam Vocational Academy?
It wasn't voluntary. It was it was not voluntary. The district was going through some transitions and obviously getting some heat from the State Department of Education, and that some changes had to be made district wide at a number of schools. And I remember the day like it was yesterday, on June 1st of 2004. Is one of the most drastic days of change in the history of Springfield Public Schools. I think nearly almost 20 administrative changes were made on that one day. And one of those changes was for me to go from the elementary school to the vocational technical school, high school. And the first thing I said to the superintendent, if you want, never been to high school before, let alone, career technical and vocational school. And I said, I'm coming from high school. I said, what kind of life? And to his credit, he says, well, it's not so much about you going to high school. It's about what you possess from a leadership perspective. And that was something that really, once again, it meant a lot. And so he saw something that I didn't see. And I ended up staying at Putnam for 6 years.
But I can say you are a great communicator, and I can say that you are a great teacher because you know how to get the word out to make sure people understand what it is exactly that you're saying. That's great in itself. How did you approach transforming? How did you approach transforming a vocational school environment?
That once again, a listener. And I remember the first meeting I had with the staff. And one of the big, I went from a staff of about 40, 45, 50 to a staff over 200. And one of the things I shared with them, I said, this is a learning experience for me. I know there's been all the rumblings about how this elementary school principal will come up here to this high school and do some work. Well, I've got to learn. I said, I'm going to learn from you. I said, I don't know anything about high school except that I went to high school. I don't know anything about education, career education, but I learned. But there's one thing I do know, and that's leadership. Getting everybody on one accord, understanding what our mission is each and every day, understanding you need support, you get support, understanding that we're going to be enthusiastic for our students, their parents, and this community. You're going to get from me every single 186 days, because I don't take days off. That's going to be where it's at with me, is building this school to be a dynamic learning environment. And 6 short years, within 3 years, we were the school of choice, the high school of choice in the city of Springfield. Within 3 years, we were the high school of choice. And that's back in 2007. To this day, Putnam is still high school of choice in the city of Springfield, 2026.
Oh, wow. See, that's impact.
Yeah.
What
some great people. What a great team effort. Great team effort.
What innovations or programs at Putnam are you most proud of?
Yeah, I'm losing you a little bit, Charles. Losing you a little bit.
What innovations or programs at Putnam are you most proud of?
Well, it was a VOTEC school. It was really, how do we get these programs up to snuff to the point where we get advisory board members, that means private industry, really being attached to these programs? How about, and we also increased the number of programs. We went from about 15 to about 20 programs, but really getting our students excited about being part of student advisory skill, like Skills USA is one that comes to my mind. It's a student organization built on leadership and competition that we became a school-wide competitor with that organization. It was fantastic. Students involved in all types of competitions, anything and everything vocational or career education bound. Creating more clubs and organizations in our school, making sure we increase the athletic offerings in our school, create, just getting a long laundry list of partners attached to our school. And really, this is the only place where you want to be is Putnam Vocational. And I mean, when you look at that, it has been the same since I've gone. And the folks who have took over after they've just knocked it out of the park. All we did was build the foundation, but they just knocked it out of the park.
So, what does Springfield teach you about community-centered leadership?
That support is crucial. That people believe in the mission, in the vision that you have for education of young people, and that was something that was so evident in from the mayor to the city council to the school committee to the superintendent's office. They understood the commitment that we were making to the young people and their families in that city. And once again, we were very visible. We were very noisy with it as well. But we were very, very intentional on making that school the jewel of the city.
So, how did your leadership evolve over those 22 years?
It was really understanding that I had to keep, in order for the pace of learning, I had to keep growing as well. So it was really getting a larger network outside of Springfield. It's really tapping into what other folks were native and creative folks were doing across the country. And I was fortunate to go on to conferences and talking a few conferences, which is one, sometimes we get caught in that, we get complacent, and that's something that I couldn't allow happen to us. So really and I'm thankful for our school, for the district, for allowing me to travel and seeing other things and bringing other strategies and other programs in. And it was really, and also those districts that allowed me to come in and see their work and stealing some of their work to put into our places so we can really have our students benefit as well. But you always have to grow. There are things out there that you can do that you're not doing because you're not exposed to it. So our students here, you don't know what you don't know. We want to get rid of that not knowing. We're going to know if someone's doing something dynamic. We want to see it, and then how do we make it to the point where it fits Brockton, to the point where it's just seamless on how we can deliver services and the opportunity to young people.
So, what made you decide it was time for a new chapter at Hartford?
A phone call. A phone call. Got a phone call. At first, I kind of just. At first, I was working. I never worked in central office. I described the work of the director of school design, finding approaches to education, school, and I'm so intrigued. It's really cutting edge of school design reform work. And so interestingly, it's not far from Springfield, so I didn't have to move. It's like it's far from now, in a drive across the state border. So I decided, or was being forced to leave, but I didn't want. I said, let me get out of my comfort zone. So I tried something completely. I went to Hartford and spent 5 years. And one of the things about Hartford, I started out as a director of school design, but Hartford minimized the central office. So you wear a lot of hats in Hartford. So over my 5 years, I wore a whole lot of hats as a director of school design. Excuse me, I was the director of secondary school, secondary education. I was an interim director of elementary school. I was a director of school choice. I was a director of operations. I did special projects. I even did a stint as director of athletics as well. So you really learned. I learned a deal about the workings of central office from a more global perspective. So I value that I had in Hartford.
Let's get into let's talk a little bit about Hartford Public Schools and central office. So, what were your primary responsibilities at Hartford's central office?
Probably, performing, and we would go in and look at certain school models that might work for the community. One, it was a difficult job because one when you go in, things have to be shaken up, and sometimes it was the teaching force as well as school leadership, and sometimes make tough decisions about leaders. But then we had to look at interesting models, and the one thing I love at Hartford, we share those models with the community, the school community. And we were fortunate that we had models such as traditionary learning, such as um, leadership school, a leadership academy. We just had a number of schools. We even built a museum school to boot. But these different approaches to education, and it was really interesting to make that delivery because we always had evidence, and the evidence were other schools in other states that were doing this similar demographic. So it was having everything based on research, and Hartford was very, very big on research. So really, redesign schools for better outcomes, and again, very intentional about that work.
So, how did district level leadership expand your understanding of systemic change?
Just from the work, the work had to expand to the point of how do we make it so that we don't have X number of schools deemed underperforming. That means what supports do we have to offer to our communities, and how do we have communities involved in this process, and how do we provide teachers with the supports that they need, and from a professional development perspective, and in some cases, a resource perspective as well, in order for them to have quality of education distance. And at each school, that, that was different. But how do you make the same level of expectation? And that was always the goal. Where the expectation, the bar was here, and levels that weren't meeting expectations within a big piece. What are we giving each other that what they need in order to get to the level of expectation somewhere in the working with these communities, each community, because each community is different. And so we really couldn't have a one size fits all approach. So it was really took a lot of work on really understanding the dynamics of school communities, understanding the supports that we would need from outside of the school district, as well organizations. It could be higher ed institutions, it could be private industry. So really understanding how to learn that partnerships are crucial to the success of schools. And it was great really talking to these, and in Hartford, the insurance capital of the world. And so when you talk about some of those companies who were just great partners, having them come in and leveraging, their might, it was fantastic. And leveraging the might of higher ed as well with some of our schools. And then we had the community-based organizations who were very, very strong as well. So we're leveraging all types of support for these schools in order to build not only meeting expectations from academic performance, but also meeting the needs of those individual schools so students understand the importance of education to move on to bigger and better things upon exiting high school.
Let's talk a little bit about Madison Park Technical Vocational High School. You were the first executive director of Madison Park. What did that responsibility mean to you?
A great deal. The history, Madison Park has a storied history, and a lot of it's not really that good. And it was a school that has so much potential, treated like a stepchild in public schools. People didn't see the value of Votex. It's a very academic place. When you say tech or technical education as a it's poor, and those students usually like you and I. And so Madison Park has had stick and one that gotten to the point of just transition of leadership. Transition, I think we want to say within a 5-year period, they must have had 5 or 6 different leaders. I mean, that doesn't lend itself to a sustainable success. So district came up with that. I was fortunate enough to get, and I ended up staying at this for 6 years. And what a great! I still consider Madison Park a great place. And the growth that school has made and the trends. Granted, they've had a few leaders upon my departure in Boston, but I think there's such great potential there at Madison Park. I mean, there's some outstanding educators there, and it's just where it's got to amaze it. You know, I go back to my years in Springfield. The city of Springfield in the business sector embraced Putnam Vocational, embraced it. And we don't see that same effect in Boston. And I think that has to come from the mayor starting government, importance of that to, schools such as Madison Park, to the work development opportunities that exist there, and our private industry of really stepping up, being a large part of creating just a fantastic career technical.
So, what condition was the school in when you arrived?
Could you repeat that, Charles? Again, that didn't come through.
What condition was the school in when you arrived?
Ooh, tough and rough. And there was talk about closure, and that's something that was not an option coming in. That was not even a thought about coming in, but I know that had been some talk. But enrollment had been declining over the past decade, where you went from a school that had nearly over 1,900 students. I mean, you're down below 900 students. And so obviously when you have that drastic a drop, you're losing resources, and you're losing teachers. And so really they really have to do a great sell job about what this approach to education, vocational career technical education could do for folks, especially folks of color. And so within the 6-year period, I mean, we went from about 800 some odd students to close to 1,200 students. A similar dynamic that happened in Springfield, where we were beating the streets about singing the praises of this approach to education, that this is something that could be a game changer for families, not just students, but for families, where every single student that walks out of that school walks out with a marketable skill that someone will pay for their services. And that was really creating a great dynamic at Madison Park. And I think the city of Boston began to realize that this could be something that we can really stand behind. And so you saw little inklings of support, but it was really a couple of industry part really kicked it into gear for us.
So, how did you rebuild the school's CTE programming?
One resource, doing an assessment of where each program was. What was their advisory board like? And again, advisory boards are built with industry professionals who attach themselves to a particular program. And so we want individuals who are going to push the envelope on our programs. If they're teaching things that are out of date, tell us. Tell our instructors. We want students to learn everything that's up to date with across industry sectors. How about in having skin in the game? Is there something that you can offer? They're not just looking for money. We're looking for opportunities to visit work sites. We're looking for opportunities for internships. We're looking for opportunities for co-op opportunities. We're looking for you to come in a speaker inside the school, for, to really share your knowledge and expertise to students so they can see themselves in not only your positions, but positions within your organization, and really have a belief that Black and brown students can be successful from an urban perspective in career vocational technical education. And we began to really push that envelope a bit. So we saw stronger advisory boards. We opened up a couple more programs, such as HVAC and a few others. And so when you start looking at programs and more students come, there's more opportunity to invest in getting grants to improve equipment and improve training opportunities for our staff. So it was really going out, expending all our resources till we had nothing left. That we would put it all on the table for our staff in that school.
So let's talk a little bit about you as the assistant superintendent of secondary schools in Boston. What was your vision for secondary education across Boston public schools?
At that time, said time for a more office, and at that time, secondary was really looking at minds where they were seeing that they wanted to close the middle school and make some of the high schools. And so that created a lot of work, because that takes a lot of work to do a 7 through 12, especially from an urban perspective, and shutting down schools. So that was a big part of the work. Also increasing the footprint of career vocational technical education in other schools outside of Madison Park, which was a big well into our middle school grades, 7th and 8th grade. So that was primarily a lot of the work. It was also working with our adult education as we really look enhancing the footprint of career vocational. There was a whole lot of redesign work, so connecting private industry partners, as well as some outside organizations to be more connected. So a huge undertaking in Boston, the biggest district in New England, roughly about 46,000 at that time, and about over 120 some odd schools. And so of which you had at least 40 secondary schools. So it was a great undertaking. And again, I had the opportunity to work with some really good people on there. The work, that was a lot of work, but I really enjoyed the work. And that work is still ongoing today in Boston.
So how did you support principals and school leaders across the district?
Being very visible inside their schools, and I also did help with the accreditation process as well. So really spending quite a bit of my time, it wasn't in the cubicle, it was really at the schools, looking at how, doing daily walkthroughs, it seemed like, and seeing teachers in practice, seeing some of the practices of leadership. Again, once again, understanding what that looks like, always being a listener. What are things that you feel and some of the things that you need, that you think you need here, and how I can be of support to you. It was great supporting a lot of the initiatives of our seasoned veterans who just needed a push from central office and certain factors from finance to and such, to really supporting our newer leaders and saying, well, what's your mission and your vision? First of all, let's come up with those pieces. How do you know people getting, really challenging them to really understand dynamics about more leadership, about how do you build consensus? How do people really feel? How do people see your vision into such? So it's really doing a, which was, especially with a lot of principals that I worked with, which was great. But that was, that was really something. It kept, because I just being active in different schools, just fantastic.
So let's talk about you as principal of Brockton High School. Brockton is one of the largest high schools in the country. What drew you to this role?
I was on my 30. I thought 36 years was enough. 6 years was enough, in Boston. They were going through some times. It was just really time to call it maybe a career. But I did Brockton High School, Brockton Public Schools, that's something different. And they were going through transitions in leadership. And at first, going back, I said, I don't know if I want to do this again, being the principal, especially, school of this magnitude and the largeness of it. And I had ago, because they were just a model back in the early 2000s. It was just a great to be. Some hard times, really hard times. A few folks, it's funny the power of a phone call, where you get a phone call from some individuals that you really respect, and they have enough faith in your ability, saying, look, they really need you. They really need you to really take a look at this. And it really took a couple of phone calls and saying, at this stage, do I want to have that in? And I just indicated, look, I'll just go over the interview. And sure enough, I ended up getting a position. But Charles, through these hallways, I saw these young people here. There's something that comes through you. And I tell you, I fell in love with this place the moment I walked in. I said, there's so much here. And it's just a dynamic place that we plan. How many schools got their own planetarium? We do. We've got a stadium and a football. I mean, our football stadium seats about 9,000 people. Baseball stadium about 4,500. Tennis, you name it. It's like a community college campus. And the beauty part about it, Charles, this is the largest population of Black students in all of New England. 65% of our students are Black. I've never been in a district like that. I've never been in a school. For me, it's an honor. It's an honor to be every day representing students, 65%, but a diverse of Spanish-speaking students, white students, Asian students, across the board, multi and immigrant communities well. So we have quite a few folks from Cape Verde, so islands off of Africa, as well as Haiti. And we get a lot of Spanish-speaking students from Ecuador. I mean, it's just dynamic. And you would, Charles, if you ever, I hope that you get an opportunity to come on up and visit. I want you to come up and visit. And you're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it. And it's something coming in very early on. We have the structures. We had to just stability back in place here. In a matter of 6 months, we were really rolling. And I think we were still nowhere near the school that we want to be. But I tell you, I love the trajectory that we're on. Love the trajectory that we're on. We've got some dedicated educators here, but you have a community that is so supportive of everything that we're doing. I mean, from the parents to city office to local business, local organization. Tell you, we're bound for greatness. Bound for greatness.
So, what were your priorities on day one?
Charles, because you weren't coming through, please.
What were your priorities on day one? What were your priorities on day one?
Ooh, let's get this place under control because students were all over the building. These students were all over the building. Charles, if you ever been to Port Authority in New York, that's what it looked like. I mean, these kids were all over.
Wow.
I got to be honest, Charles. I said, "Is this school?" I said, "This ain't." I used the word "ain't" too. This ain't school.
Wow.
But it was really getting students to understand responsibilities. It's like, look, we do school here. We do school here. Really slowly, but clearing, getting the hallways clear, getting those hallways clear. They had an issue with fighting, had a big issue with violence in the building, and really just reducing that. It seemed like every time you turn around, somebody's doing something. But we really, I mean, the visibility factor really helped a great deal. Being all over the building, where you spend probably 90% of your time in the hallways and in the classrooms, I think it made a difference early on in those first couple of months where, someone's watching, and as we're not watching, we're in front. We have expectations, and really stopping students and talking to groups of students about expectations and what perceptions, what the perceived notions of others, of schools like ours, of Black and brown students in the surrounding area. That's something that we just being very truthful and very honest with our conversations with students. And then there were consequences. And, some of the unfortunate pieces, violence is never an option here at Brockton High School. If you put your hands on somebody, you can't be here. You just can't be here because violence, we don't solve things with our fists. We solve them with our minds, and we solve them with collaboration. And so that was one of the pieces that were very, very much supported the district and the city, where we got to suspend folks, and we did. And we saw the temperature slowly coming down to the point where you saw some, after a 6-month period from January of coming in January of 24 to June of 24, you saw a difference. You saw a difference. And it really was the impetus of opening up the school year of last year, 24-25, really on a positive note. And so we've been getting stronger and stronger, where we've seen a decrease in violence, an uptick in the way students are approaching school. We saw just as recently, we saw a massive increase, a 10% increase in our graduation rate from the previous year. And that's across all demographics, from the school, from an aggregate, from our Black students to our Spanish-speaking students to our special education students and our multilingual learners, all saw a 10% jump in their. But we're not satisfied because those rates got to be over 90. It can't be in the 80s. We want to go 95 and above. So we really have our work cut out, but we're willing to do that work to make those things happen. But each and every day, I feel that we're taking a step forward. And I got to, everyone said, well, how much longer do you have? I said, I ain't worried about how much time I got left. I just want to keep doing the work until I can't do it anymore.
Let's talk a little bit about your workforce development and your CTE vision. What does workforce readiness look like for today's students?
It starts with, people used to call them soft skills. I call them professional skills. And, professional skills, showing up on time regularly, being in the mode to work each and every day, offering your services, looking people in the eye when you communicate, you're looking someone eye to eye all the time. Being an avid listener, moving that list action steps, move or that being better. Those professional skills, they just get your door. And just like with this, practicing your skill day, repetitive. So if I'm building those perfect wells, at home that I can work with, I do it. If I can bring home, I take advantage of those opportunities. Workforce development perspective, that gives you the to get the job done. That gives you that little extra. It's not going to still it's done. Where you're willing to give extra efforts to make jobs are done to completion. And so those are pieces with workforce development that you are just ready from a perspective where you come dressed the part. If I'm in the health field, I got my smock on. I'm ready. I got my pieces on, my blue outfit on. I'm ready. And I got some soft as well. I'm not wearing slacks.
Right.
I'm ready to go. If I'm going out on a construction site, I got my construction, I've got my safety glasses before someone even tells me to put them on. I have a portfolio. And I can pull my portfolio on my laptop. I'm ready to go. Making sure that you're always in a position of being prepared for opportunity. And that's, and that's something we're really trying to instill to our students here in Bryant as we increase our career technical education programs.
So, how can CTE programs close opportunity gaps for Black and Brown youths?
It's funny, and that it's a question that's commonly asked. And Charles, I'm gonna get historical with you again. And I know there used to be a debate about Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois. And years, people thought, was winning. I said, but see, it was something about Booker T. Washington able to build your own home, plumbing, and really be a master of craft, because your skills are transferable anywhere in the world. And when you look at today's educational cycle, career vocational technical education is in. Teaching kids skills for industry, that's in. And I say, yeah, Booker T. Washington stood the test of time, giving students the opportunity to have a marketable skill in which literally they can make an informed decision at age 18 at graduation, whether to go into post-secondary education or go into the world industry. Course of action for them. That is a powerful leverage chip that technical education does. It gives you the leverage to go into the world of work 18, 19 years of age, and you're earning more than a third year may make. You're making more than a college graduate would make in 2 or 3 years because you have that type of skills. And also to boot, our students will have the ability to get industry recognized credentials that are accepted across industries. So when you have a health that's 5 or 6 industry related credentials going in, let's say they want to go in for a nursing degree, they're going in more prepared than any other student going in. These students have in the summer where literally they can work anywhere. Their education. We have carpentry students who can get into the union at 18 and have been and work until 40 years of age and higher and never step foot into a college campus. Now there are other things that they have to go to for training, but they have those opportunities to make more money in their family being a teenager. That opportunity, that's game-changing opportunity. And that's the opportunity we want to offer our students.
So, what legacy do you hope to leave in the world of education and workforce development?
As educators, our sole purpose is not just to offer a diploma at the end of the formal public education. Our goal, and I'm hoping that is legacy that we can continue, is that we prepared students to take advantage of any and all opportunity that avails to them upon graduation, that they are aptly prepared for post-secondary and higher ed. They're prepared if they decide to go into the world of industry, that they are aptly prepared for it. They're mature enough to handle a gap year, but even if they go into the military, that they're aptly prepared to be successful in the military ranks. We had that, and especially with our Black and brown students, when we started reducing that gap of a graduation gap, that Black and brown students are capable of any and all things possible in the realm of society. And we've got to believe that every educator's got to believe it. And I think that's a legacy I hope that we can create, that students are capable of all things.
You know, I mentioned to you that we do Black History 365, and I asked you who was the most influential persons in your life and career. You said Malcolm X, Nelson Mandela, and Booker T. Washington. Can you tell us? Malcolm X taught the world about self-determination, discipline, and the power of redefining one's identity. In what ways has Malcolm's
Yes,
philosophy shaped your approach to leadership and personal growth?
You know, one, when you excuse me, when you look at Malcolm X, the full circle of a man. You look at his beginnings, you know, and he's legal. He's change, a transformation, you know, when he became involved in the Nation of Islam. And you saw the approach there. It was teaching to hate the white race, but say us loving the Black race, loving ourselves. And so, you know, we should be self-determined to do the things within our own communities. And then you saw the break from the nation as well, certain things that some ideological things that changed him, began to reflect as an older man about the vastness of not only his religion of Islam, but of other people as well. And so, but all throughout that, a disciplined life, a life committed to the community. And those are the things in which, you know, committing oneself, you know, to others without where he asked for anything. He didn't want anything for everything that he was giving out, you know, in the life. But he was a true, and I see this someone who had such belief in his own people. He had belief in himself. He had belief in his people, and that's what I'm looking at here when I look at our own, with our students of color, having that belief. I don't want anything returned. I just want to give as much as I possibly can. So to be better, contrive to be the best possible versions of themselves and provide for themselves and sustain themselves for decades on end. And that's one of the things I get from Malcolm X.
Nelson Mandela embodied forgiveness, resilience, and the long fight for justice. How has Mandela's journey informed your ability to lead through conflict, transition, or resistance?
Well, you look at what he did. And when you talk about resiliency, look no further. Being in prison for 27 years for really, but to come out and become president of an apartheid state down in South Africa, to be president of that and be forgiving of a system was responsible for him being in prison and for him just being so beyond that, saying we are all South Africans and being for the nation. I tell you, you know, I got a huge, you can't see it here. I got a massive, massive picture of him right here. And it's the, you know, and he says in this, and I'll read it for you. He says, there's no easy way. And many of us will have to pass through the valley of the death again, before we reach the mountaintop of desires. And keep that in front of me. Some of the things that through how he didn't suck to it and came out as the true humanitarian that he is. Well, you know, who else could you select?
Final question for you. Booker T. Washington championed vocational education, economic empowerment, and practical skill building. How has his legacy influenced your commitment to CTE and workforce development?
I tell you, when you talk about self-determination, that's Booker T. When you look at the work that this 1800s into the early 1900s about building schools with students, and the value of determining resiliency and understanding that each and every Black man, woman needed a marketable, needed a skill, not only to lend itself to build communities. And I father of vocational education, we call career technical education. He's the father of that. You know, everybody talks about Dewey, John Dewey, with constructivism, and you learn by doing. That was Booker T. Washington earlier, way before him. And I just fact that he had the wherewithal to think, someone skills that could sustain themselves and their families and communities, that would become a movement in 2000. I'd say it's vision. Booker, a visionary.
So, in closing, what are some words of wisdom and encouragement that you'd like to leave for our audience to tell them how they can connect with you via your social media, your website, or just in general, just the good things that you want them to know?
Well, I think you can always get in touch with me. I don't do a lot of social media. I do a lot of LinkedIn. The only social media I really do is LinkedIn. I really do quite a bit of that. But you can go on our website, and my email address is always there. You can always get in contact. If anyone ever wants to reach out, more than happy to share. More than happy to do things in this. One of the things as black educators, we need to connect more. I think we have an understanding what each one of us has gone through, and it hasn't been an easy ride. But I think when you have someone that you can talk to without anyone passing judgment on you, but really offer some tips on how we are able to have the longevity that they've had in this particular field, but also from a workforce development program. If there's any issues or Fortune 500 companies that may not be quite Fortune 500. If you really want to support a school that's on the rise with career vocational tech education, you need to come and see us here at Brockton High School, because we are really on the move. But I also want to thank Charles. Thank you for providing this forum, because they do a great deal of work for us, really out there, and it's a tribute to the work that you're doing. And I pray that your success continues to go on, because you are making a true difference, my brother. You are making a true difference.
Well, I want to thank you so very much for that. And before I do my closing monologue, I just want to say to you, your resume is more than just impressive, but the work that you have done for those 38 years up to now is really, that's a mark for you. That's a mark for the community. That's a mark for education. That's a mark that people need to look at as more than just a standard. But this is where we are. And as I was saying to you, it is amazing that all of the educators, especially the Black male educators that I've had here on the show, you guys are making such an impact in classrooms until it's second to none. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
It's second to none. And
Thank
I
you.
mean, I can blow the horn. I will blow the horn, because this is where it's at. And see, the more males that we can get in the education forum to do these things that you and the others are doing, this is the difference that it's going to take. And so
yes, indeed.
I just applaud you for that.
Thank you.
And so
thank you,
for
sir.
all
I
of our
appreciate
guests, for all of our guests that are watching on all of our platforms, including our YouTube channels, if you have not yet subscribed to our channels and enabled all notifications, I would appreciate if you would support us by by subscribing to our channels and enabling those notifications where you can get the shows live. You can also have the opportunity to go back and look at all of the work that all of our professionals are leaving as a great message for people in our community to learn an enormous amount of things from. So in closing, I want to say this. Kevin McCaskill's story reminds us that leadership is not about titles, it's about impact. It's about showing up year after year for communities that deserve the very best. It's about building systems that honor the brilliance of our children, and it's about believing that every young person, no matter their zip code, deserves a pathway to dignity, purpose, and possibility. Tonight, we didn't just hear a story of an educator. We heard the story of a builder, a reformer, a champion for equity, a man who has given his life to ensuring that the next generation has the tools, the skills, and the confidence to step boldly into their future. This is the work. This is the mission. This is America in Black and White. And I'm your host, Charles King. And you guys have a great evening, and we will see you tomorrow.